A family could go broke not from buying a house, but from buying one extra loaf of bread at the wrong time. That sounds exaggerated, I know. But in 1932, a penny was not just spare change. It was a child's lunch, or a ride to work the next morning. I keep wondering why so many families did not collapse as quickly as we imagine they should have. The banks were failing, jobs were disappearing, and inside many homes, there was almost nothing between survival and humiliation except a kitchen table, a pencil, and a rule nobody was allowed to break. Not because they were financial geniuses, not because poverty made them noble. No, poverty makes people tired. But these families carried small household laws written in hunger, debt, cold rooms, and quiet shame. And those laws did something modern convenience often does not do. They slowed panic down. So here are 10 Depression-era household rules that kept families from going broke. Not cute habits, not nostalgia, survival rules. The first rule was the Friday payday table. Before anyone bought anything, the week's wages were placed in the open. Right there, on the table. Rent came first, food came after, then coal, medicine, school shoes, church money, and whatever debts still followed the family from the week before. A father might bring home $17 after a shortened factory week. His wife would separate it slowly, one bill at a time, because guessing was dangerous. $3 for rent, $5 for groceries, $1 for fuel, a little for shoe repair if the soles truly could not last another month. And whatever remained was not called extra money. That word would have sounded careless. It was the margin, the thin line between order and trouble. The second rule was this: pay with cash, not with hope. Store credit looked harmless when the clerk wrote your name in the ledger. 1 pound of flour, a little salt pork, a spool of thread. But debt grows in silence. It sits quietly all week, then waits at the end of the month with its hand out. People said small debts were not frightening, maybe. But Depression households knew better. Small debts could multiply faster than wages. So if there was no money in the envelope, the thing did not yet belong to the family. That was hard. But it was clean. The third rule was painfully simple. Wait 1 week. Not for medicine, not for rent. Everything else waited. A new kettle, a better coat, a lamp for the parlor, a toy a child had been asking about since Sunday. Families did not always say no forever. They said, not yet. And that pause mattered. Because desire is loud when it first arrives. Need is usually quieter. A woman might see a blanket marked down in a shop window and want it badly. She would stand there for a moment, cold hands, thin coat, the window glass between her and comfort. Then she would go home. She would look at the old blanket. She would mend the edge. And if, 1 week later, the need was still real, then the family would talk again. The fourth rule was to ask the house before asking the store. What is already here? What is in the pantry? What is at the bottom of the jar? What can be cooked again, mixed again, stretched one more day? Modern shopping often begins with a recipe and ends with 5 new purchases. Depression cooking often began with 2 onions, a little cornmeal, a spoonful of lard, and dried beans that had to become supper because supper had no other plan. The store was not the first answer. Imagination was. The fifth rule was the repair basket. It did not look important. A few socks with holes, a shirt missing a button, a child's coat torn at the sleeve, a dish towel frayed at the edge. But that basket was not clutter. It was money waiting to be saved. A sock with a hole was not trash. It was a task. A torn sleeve did not mean a new coat. It meant somebody had to sit 10 minutes longer under the lamp. I do not want to romanticize this. There is nothing charming about being forced to mend what you wish you could replace. But there is a kind of intelligence in repair. A 10-cent fix could delay a $2 purchase. And in a house where $2 mattered, that was not small. The sixth rule was the soup bone. Dinner did not end when the plates were cleared. Dinner ended when nothing useful remained. A Sunday roast became sliced meat on Monday, then hash on Tuesday, then soup by Wednesday. The bone went into the pot with onion skins, carrot ends, salt, and whatever else the kitchen had left to offer. Earlier kitchens did not look at leftovers and see yesterday. They saw tomorrow. And if the broth was strong enough and the bread was not too stale, Tuesday could still keep 6 people from going to bed hungry. That is not abundance, but it is defense. The seventh rule was to grow what could be eaten. A backyard was not just a backyard. It was potatoes, beans, tomatoes, onions. Sometimes it was a winter with slightly less fear in it. A row of jars on a pantry shelf was not decoration. It was summer trapped in glass. Tomatoes sealed under metal lids. Peaches in syrup. Beans put away before the cold arrived. Every jar said the same thing. Not today, hunger, not yet. The eighth rule was to borrow before buying. Not every house needed its own saw. Not every kitchen needed a tool used once a year. One neighbor had a hammer, another had eggs, another had scrap cloth. And in poor neighborhoods, what saved a household was sometimes not money at all, but memory. Who needed what? Who could wait? Who had a sick child? Who needed a basket of potatoes left quietly by the door? We call that community now as if it were an idea. For them, it was infrastructure. Soft infrastructure, maybe, but real. The ninth rule was the emergency jar. Somewhere in the house, behind flour tins or deep inside a cabinet, there was often a glass jar with nickels, dimes, quarters, and the occasional folded bill. It was not for candy, not for a movie, not for a ribbon or a better Sunday hat. It was for trouble, a doctor visit, a cracked shoe sole, a train ticket, 3 days of food if work stopped without warning. One coin dropped into a jar did not make anyone feel rich, but it made panic move more slowly, and sometimes that was enough. The 10th rule may have been the hardest. Do not let pride pull you into debt. A child wearing a patched coat to school might feel ashamed. A father carrying cold lunch to the factory might lower his eyes. A mother serving bean soup for the third time in a week might apologize when she had done nothing wrong. But debt taken on to look less poor was still debt. That is the part we do not like hearing. Many families did not survive because they earned more. They survived because money left more slowly. Not always, not perfectly, not fairly, but there was order inside the home, and that order kept fear from giving the commands. The truth is, these rules did not make poverty pleasant. They only made it manageable for one more day, and maybe that is why they still feel unsettling. Those families had far less than we do, but they often knew exactly where every dollar was going. So ask the question, not to worship the past, but to examine the present. What habit did we lose before we lost the money? Because sometimes, what keeps a family from going broke is not a larger income. It is a small rule kept faithfully on the hardest day, and that rule, quiet as it seems, may be the difference between panic and survival.